Xavier Orton stepped out of the sleek black town car and glanced up at the glass-fronted hotel gleaming in the Miami sun, not knowing that the woman behind the front desk was about to turn his entire world upside down. Mr. Orton, his assistant, Miles, handed him a clipboard. The Harbor Lux is ready for your walkthrough. Soft open's been running a week. Staff's been vetted. You're just here to show face and give the final green light. Xavier barely nodded, already scanning the building. This was his 15th hotel opening under Orton International Holdings, but he never stopped being meticulous. The lobby was pristine marble floors, modern chandeliers, ocean views, and the scent of citrus and linen in the air. The kind of place people paid thousands a night to forget real life. "Let's go," Xavier said, tugging at the cuff of his crisp navy shirt as he strode toward the front desk. And that's when he saw her. She was laughing softly with an older couple, typing something into the computer with one hand, tucking a loose strand of chestnut hair behind her ear with the other. She wore the standard uniform white blouse, sleek black blazer, but there was nothing standard about her. Her eyes were sharp, her smile effortless, and when she glanced up and met his gaze, he felt it like a punch to the chest. "Can I help you?" she asked, polite but unreadable. Miles opened his mouth, but Xavier cut in, stepping forward. "Are you the front desk manager?" "No," she said. "Just checking in guests." "Lauren Bishop." "Guest services." "Lauren Bishop." He tried the name in his head. It already sounded like trouble. "I'm Xavier Orton," he said simply. "Founder of Orton Holdings." Her eyes widened just for a second and then she nodded. "Ah, right? We were told you'd be visiting today." She didn't fawn. She didn't gush. She didn't even seem remotely impressed. And for some reason, that made his pulse tick up. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Orton," she added, her tone cool and professional. "If you need anything, I'm happy to assist." "I'll keep that in mind," he said, his voice lower than usual. He didn't look away until Miles cleared his throat beside him. They moved on, touring the rooftop bar, the infinity pool, the penthouse suites. Xavier did his job, asked questions, made notes, flagged a few inconsistencies. But the entire time his mind kept drifting back to the woman at the desk. Lauren Bishop. He didn't know why. By the time the tour ended, it was nearly 6. Guests were arriving for dinner, the lobby buzzing with energy. Xavier lingered by the entrance, watching Lauren speak with a family of 4, crouching to hand the youngest girl a lollipop from behind the counter. "She's good," Miles said, following his gaze. "Local. Been here since the start of the soft launch. I can get you her file if you want." "No," Xavier said quickly. Then, after a beat, "It's fine." But it wasn't fine. Because the next thing he knew, he was walking straight back to the desk. Lauren glanced up, surprised. "Back so soon?" "I forgot to ask something," he replied smoothly. "Dinner. What's the best on-site spot?" She hesitated. "Most guests go to the rooftop, Ember. Chef from Barcelona, open kitchen, great views. Do you recommend it?" Her lips curved slightly. "I do." "Then join me," he said. She blinked. "Excuse me. I'd like to hear your thoughts in person." "If you're off shift." She looked at him like she was trying to figure out if he was serious. "Are you asking me out, Mr. Orton?" "Xavier," he corrected. "And yes, I am. Dinner. Tonight." Lauren studied him for a second longer, then slowly nodded. "I get off at 7. Give me 15 minutes. Xavier didn't smile, not fully, but something tight in his chest eased. "I'll be waiting." The rooftop was glowing with golden light and the hum of quiet laughter. The wind carried the scent of grilled seafood and rosemary, and candles flickered on every table. When Lauren stepped out of the elevator, she wasn't in her uniform anymore. She wore a simple black dress, her hair down, her heels clicking softly against the stone. She looked nothing like a hotel employee now and everything like a woman who had no idea how stunning she was. Xavier stood when she approached. "You clean up well." Lauren arched a brow. "You say that to all your staff?" "Only the ones who make me forget I'm here for work." She laughed, finally relaxing a little as they sat. The waiter poured wine, took their orders, and left them with a plate of warm bread and olive oil. "So," Lauren said, tearing a piece off, "do you always invite random employees to dinner during your hotel tours?" "No," Xavier said honestly. Never. She tilted her head. Why me then? He met her gaze. I don't know. You just pulled me in. Her smile faltered for a second like she didn't know what to do with that kind of honesty. Well, that's one way to keep things interesting. Their conversation flowed easily. She told him she'd grown up outside Tampa, moved to Miami 2 years ago, and was saving up for something, though she wouldn't say what. He told her about his company, how he built it from nothing after college, and how he still toured every new property himself. But don't you get tired? She asked, swirling her wine. Of all this? He looked around at the luxury, the view, the flawless illusion, and then back at her. Sometimes, he said. But not tonight. By the time dessert came, she was laughing freely, leaning in closer. Xavier hadn't laughed this much in months. Maybe years. When they finally stood, she hesitated. This was unexpected. Good unexpected? He asked. She nodded slowly. Yeah. Very. They lingered by the elevator. He didn't touch her. Didn't push. Get home safe, he said softly. You too, she replied. Then the doors closed and she was gone. Xavier stood there for a long minute, staring at the empty space where she'd been, his heartbeat louder than it should have been. He came here to sign off on a hotel. But now he wasn't so sure that was all he wanted. The morning after their dinner, Xavier stood at the corner of the hotel's private conference suite, arms crossed, watching the operations meeting unfold. His watch ticked past 9 as department heads filtered through updates. He nodded occasionally, but his attention drifted again to the front desk visible through the glass wall. Lauren wasn't there. He hadn't expected that to bother him. But it did. And we've had no guest complaints since the soft launch began, the general manager was saying. Only one minor glitch with the keycard system yesterday, but that's been corrected. Xavier's voice was quiet but firm. Who handled it? Lauren Bishop, the manager replied. Quick thinker. She comped their dinner and had the lock replaced before engineering even clocked in. He didn't respond, just tapped his pen against the table once, then set it down. After the meeting adjourned, he didn't return to his suite. Instead, he stepped into the lobby and scanned the check-in stations. Lauren still wasn't on duty. A young man with a buzz cut stood behind the desk instead. Where's Lauren? Xavier asked directly. The man straightened. She's off for the next 2 days. Xavier didn't react outwardly, but something shifted in his chest. He turned without another word and headed for the elevator. Back in his suite, he opened his laptop, intending to review expansion proposals for the Vancouver property. But instead, he typed her name into the employee directory. Lauren Elise Bishop, 26. Hired 6 months ago. No red flags. No notes. Just a quiet record of consistent excellence. There was no emergency contact listed. He closed the screen and moved to the window, gazing down at the shimmering pool 3 stories below. The palm-lined terrace dotted with guests in linen and sunglasses. He wasn't the type to chase. He didn't do distractions. But now distraction was all he could think about. Later that evening, dressed in a charcoal blazer and open-collared shirt, Xavier stood at the valet, handing off the keys to his Aston Martin. The restaurant he booked was 5 miles away, exclusive, quiet, the kind of place with no online menu and no posted prices. But after staring at his untouched steak for 20 minutes, he paid the bill and walked out. He didn't head back to the hotel. He drove. The address he'd found in her file led him to a modest neighborhood 20 minutes inland. The streets were lined with bungalows and flickering porch lights. He parked at the curb, unsure of what he was even doing. The front door of her house opened just as he stepped out. Lauren emerged carrying a laundry basket, headphones in, dressed in jeans and a faded t-shirt. She didn't see him at first. Then she looked up and froze. He raised a hand. Hey! Her expression shifted. Confused, then wary. What are you doing here? He walked closer, stopping at the edge of her driveway. I shouldn't be. I know that. Then why are you? I wanted to see you. She set the basket down slowly. You have my number. You could have called. I didn't want to be a name on a screen. Lauren crossed her arms. You tracked down my address? I asked where you were. They told me you were off. I looked you up. That's not exactly casual. No, he admitted. But I haven't been able to stop thinking about you. She blinked, caught off guard. You barely know me. I know how you handled that dinner rush with 3 guests shouting at once. I know you didn't flinch when I introduced myself. I know you make people feel seen. And I know I haven't felt this off balance in years. Lauren looked down, processing, then back up. This isn't normal. You're a hotel mogul. You, he interrupted, are the first person in a very long time who doesn't care who I am. Silence stretched between them. Crickets hummed in the hedges. A dog barked somewhere down the street. Finally, she sighed. Do you want to come in? He hesitated. Only if you want me to. I don't invite strangers inside. Then let me stay out here. Lauren studied him for a long moment, then went inside briefly and returned with a hoodie over her shoulders and 2 mugs of something steaming. Sage tea, she said, handing him one. You look like you haven't slept. He accepted the cup, surprised. I haven't. They sat on the front steps, both quiet for a beat. She finally broke it. You know, I used to think people like you never noticed people like me. You glide into a place, sign paperwork, disappear in a jet. I figured you had a whole team to make sure you never had to touch the ground. I used to, Xavier said. Then I realized I hated not knowing the people who made my business work. She glanced at him sideways. And now you're here, on my steps, drinking tea. I didn't plan this. Neither did I. They lapsed into silence again, but this time it felt easier. After a few minutes, Lauren spoke again. My mom lived here before she passed. I moved in last year. Can't afford the beach, but I like the quiet. He didn't ask anything further. He just nodded. Eventually she stood. I should go in. He rose too. I'll go. But before he turned, she caught his arm lightly. Xavier. He looked down at her hand. She let go. Thanks for not pretending. He met her eyes. I don't know how to be anyone else with you. She watched him walk back to his car. He didn't look back, but he felt her eyes on him the whole way. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel alone. Xavier stepped into his penthouse suite the next morning. Tension in his shoulders he hadn't realized he was carrying. The early light spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the polished stone floors. He didn't sit. Instead, he stood by the balcony doors, watching the ocean churn beyond the glass. It was barely 6, but he hadn't slept. Again, he rarely let anything interfere with his schedule. But now, every time he closed his eyes, he saw Lauren on that porch, barefoot in worn jeans, offering him tea like it was the most natural thing in the world. His phone vibrated on the glass coffee table. A name flashed across the screen: Douglas Fenton, COO. Xavier answered on the second ring. We need your signature on the Prague acquisition by noon. You've been sitting on the revised terms for 3 days. I'll look them over, Xavier said. There was a pause. You're still in Miami? Yes. Another pause. Xavier, you've already approved the Harbor Lux. If this is about the Charleston expansion, it's not. Xavier cut in. I'll call when I've reviewed the terms. He ended the call without waiting for a response. By 8, he was already dressed: dark trousers, tailored button-down, no tie. He didn't know exactly what he was doing, only that staying in this suite felt like drowning. He found her at the open-air market on Collins Avenue. He hadn't planned to go there. He was just driving, windows down, when he saw her bent over a small stall of succulents, sunglasses perched on her head, one hand holding a canvas tote heavy with produce. He parked without thinking. Going to open a greenhouse? He asked as he approached. Lauren turned, startled at first, then gave a quick, wary smile. Didn't expect to see you here. I didn't expect to be here. She glanced down at the pot in her hand. I was hoping this one would survive my kitchen window. I keep killing basil. You cook. Not well, she said, brushing her hair back. But I try. He looked at the tote. You buying for yourself? My neighbor's out of town. I promised I'd bring her fruit for her juice bar. Xavier nodded slowly. Do you mind some company? She hesitated, then handed him the bag. If you're carrying this, you're officially on grocery duty. They walked together down the row of stalls, vendors calling out prices, tourists meandering with iced coffees and straw hats. Lauren stopped at a table of handmade soaps and picked one up, sniffing it absently. "Do you ever get tired of being followed?" she asked without looking at him. "I'm not followed," Xavier said. "You showed up at my house yesterday. Now here." He didn't answer immediately. "Then I never do this. I don't have time to want things that don't make sense." Lauren finally looked up. "And I don't usually let men with $200 shoes carry my groceries." Xavier glanced down. They were 6. She laughed softly, shaking her head. "Unreal." They walked a little more, stopping at a stand with golden mangoes and fresh lime. She picked through them carefully, examining each one before dropping it in the bag. "You're meticulous," he said. "Grew up with someone who wasted nothing. My mom could stretch a bag of rice into 3 meals." Xavier was quiet a long moment. "What did she do?" "She worked in a bakery. Early mornings, long hours. Never made it to my graduation because her shift ran late. She sounds like she was tough." "She was," Lauren said, her tone gentler now. "In all the best ways." They reached the end of the market, the bag now full. Lauren paused, adjusting the strap over her shoulder. "I should get this home," she said. "I'll drive you." "I didn't ask for that." "I know," he said quietly. "But I want to." She studied him for a moment, then nodded once. The ride was quiet, the radio low, the kind of silence that needed no explanation. When they reached her street, she didn't ask him to stay. But she didn't tell him to leave either. Inside, she placed the mangoes in a bowl by the window and set the soap on the counter. Xavier leaned against the doorway, watching her move with a kind of purpose that didn't ask for attention. He noticed the uneven tile near the sink, the tiny crack in the wall above the refrigerator. This wasn't luxury, but it was real. "You said you didn't have time to want things that don't make sense," she said, turning to face him. "Then why are you still here?" He didn't move. "Because I've built a life around knowing what to expect. And you're the first thing I didn't see coming." She walked toward him, slow, deliberate. When she stopped in front of him, there was something fierce in her expression, curiosity, maybe, or defiance. "Are you looking for something you can't control?" "No," Xavier said. "I'm looking for something that matters." Lauren looked up at him, eyes searching. Then, without another word, she reached for his hand. He followed her to the couch where they sat without pretense. No grand gestures, no rehearsed lines. "I don't know what this is," she said. "Neither do I," he admitted. "But I'm not running from it," she added. "Good," he said, his voice low, "because I'm not letting go." They didn't kiss. They didn't need to. For now, being there together, quiet and unguarded, was enough. But Xavier already knew this wasn't something he could compartmentalize. It wasn't something he could shelve after a weekend in Miami. This was the beginning of something that would demand more. And for the first time, he was ready to give it. Rain lashed the windows of the Harbor Lux as Lauren stepped inside, water dripping from her umbrella onto the polished stone floor. She shook it once, then folded it, pushing damp hair off her face. The afternoon storm had rolled in fast, the sky now a silvery blur behind the glass walls of the lobby. She was off shift again, but she hadn't come for work. Xavier had left a note at her door that morning. Not a text, not a call, a handwritten note that simply said, "Come to the ballroom at 5. Trust me." She had stared at it for a long time before sliding it into her bag. Now, walking past the concierge with a nod, she followed the signs to the grand ballroom normally reserved for weddings, fundraisers, and the kind of galas she imagined only happened in movies. But when she opened the double doors, her breath caught. The entire space had been transformed. Golden uplighting glowed off ivory draping that hung from the 20-foot ceilings. Dozens of candles flickered in glass cylinders lining a narrow path that led to a single table in the center of the room set for 2, with tall crystal flutes, silver cutlery, and a bouquet of white peonies resting in a slender vase. And standing at the end of the path was Xavier. He wore a dark suit, no tie, his hands in his pockets. He didn't smile when he saw her, he just watched her cross the room, eyes locked on hers like he was memorizing every step. She stopped 3 feet from him. She looked around, stunned. What is this? Xavier's voice was quiet but steady. The Harbor Lux was supposed to open with a formal gala last night. We canceled it because of a scheduling conflict. She raised an eyebrow. So you rescheduled it for 2 people? No, he said. I never wanted the gala. Not really. But I wanted this. With you. Lauren glanced at the table, then back at him. You've known me less than 2 weeks. I've known a version of myself for years, he said. The one who moves through cities without noticing the people who make them work. But you stopped me cold, Lauren. You didn't try to impress me. You didn't care who I was. And somehow that made me want to know everything about you. Her eyes shimmered, but she didn't speak. Xavier stepped closer. I've worked for everything I have. I've built my name, my company, my life. But somehow none of it felt solid until I met you. She swallowed, her voice barely above a whisper. Why me? Because you ask questions no one else does. Because you challenge me without trying. Because you remind me what it's like to feel something real. Lauren looked around again, the room glowing with quiet opulence. This is insane. Maybe, Xavier admitted. But I've realized something. For the first time, I want to build something I can't control. Something messy, unpredictable, and completely worth it. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, black velvet box. Her breath hitched. I'm not asking for forever today, he said. But I am asking for a chance. A real one. Come with me. Let's find out what this is. Together. He opened the box. Inside wasn't a ring, it was a key. Lauren stared at it. It's to the top floor suite, he said. Not tonight. Not even tomorrow. But when you're ready, if you're ready, you'll have a place that's yours. No strings. No expectations. She looked up at him, completely thrown. You're not trying to buy me? No, Xavier said. I'm trying to make space for you in my world. On your terms. Tears threatened at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them back. This doesn't make sense, she whispered. Nothing important ever does. A long silence stretched between them. Then slowly, Lauren reached out and closed her fingers around the key. The moment her hand touched his, Xavier exhaled, as if he'd been holding his breath for days. She didn't say anything she didn't need to. Her eyes said enough. They didn't sit down to dinner. Not right away. Instead, he took her hand and led her to the floor, where no music played, no one watched, and the city outside the windows pulsed with distant thunder. They danced in silence. Her head rested against his chest. His arms closed around her. And for the first time, Xavier wasn't thinking about business or expansion or projections. He was just thinking about how right it felt to be here with her. Later that night, they stood on the rooftop as the sky cleared. The stars came out, scattered and blinking above the ocean. The rain had washed the city clean and the air smelled new. I don't know where this is going, Lauren said quietly, gazing out at the horizon. Neither do I, Xavier replied. But I know I want to find out. She turned to him, her expression open and steady. So do I. He kissed her then, slow, certain, the kind of kiss that didn't need promises or declarations. It just needed truth. And that was exactly what they had. Not perfection. Not a fairy tale. But something real. Something that would take work. Patience. Trust. And for Xavier, who had spent a lifetime building empires, this was the first thing he hadn't planned and the only thing he knew with absolute clarity he didn't want to live without. The first time Lauren walked into Xavier's penthouse carrying a duffel bag and a half-empty iced coffee, she stopped just past the threshold, looked around, and said, "This place is too clean." "Are you sure you live here?" Xavier, lounging on the slate gray sectional in a t-shirt and jeans, glanced up from his laptop. "I had it cleaned. I didn't realize I was inviting judgment." Lauren set the bag down. "No judgment. Just wondering if I need to take my shoes off or if the floor is going to eject me. Keep them on. I like you grounded." She cracked a grin as she walked into the open kitchen. "You stocked the fridge?" "I asked what tea you liked. You didn't answer. So I bought every box they had." Lauren opened the fridge and blinked. "You weren't kidding." She pulled out a bottle of green tea. "You know, normal people just ask again. I'm not interested in being normal." She leaned against the counter and studied him. You've really never done this before? I've had relationships, but not like this. Lauren twisted the cap off the bottle and took a sip. Define like this. He closed the laptop and stood walking toward her. Where I care what you think before I make a decision. Where I wake up hoping you're still here. Where I'm not 5 steps ahead trying to calculate the fallout. She set the bottle down. That's a lot of pressure. No, he said, resting his hands on either side of the counter near her. That's me telling you I'm all in. Lauren's eyes softened, but she didn't rush toward him. She never did. She always gave herself space to feel things fully. I'm not used to someone making room for me, she murmured. I'm not used to needing someone in my space. They stood there a moment longer, the air between them warm and steady. Then she reached over and took his hand. Let's see how we do with groceries and laundry before we start writing vows. He chuckled, the sound low and rare. Fair enough. Over the next several weeks, their lives intertwined with a rhythm that surprised them both. Lauren kept her job at the Harbor Lux, but her hours became more flexible. Xavier made adjustments to his travel schedule, something he hadn't done for anyone in years. They didn't move in together. They just stayed. Night after night. Day after day. Sometimes she stayed at her house, especially when she needed time to herself. He never questioned it. Instead, he started keeping a bottle of her favorite shampoo in his shower, and a drawer in his closet cleared for the next time she came back. One morning, as they sat on the penthouse balcony with coffee and the Miami skyline stretched out in hazy pink and gold, Lauren crossed her legs beneath her and said, "Do you ever think about what's next?" Xavier looked at her, still in the oversized t-shirt she'd stolen from him 3 nights ago. "I think about now, a lot more than I used to. But you're always building something, always thinking ahead." He nodded once. "What I'm building now doesn't need permits or architects." She tilted her head. "Then what does it need?" He leaned forward, brushing a hand down her arm. "You. And time." Lauren stared at him for a long moment, then reached into her pocket and pulled out the key he'd given her weeks ago. She set it on the table between them. "I don't need this anymore," she said. His brow lifted slightly. "Are you giving it back?" "No," she said. "I'm saying I don't need a key to be here. I'm already in." Xavier didn't say anything for a moment. Then he stood, walked inside, and returned with a small box made of smooth walnut wood. He set it beside the key. Lauren opened it. Inside was a ring. Not flashy. Not oversized. Just a single diamond on a slender platinum band, elegant and deliberate. Her breath caught. "I didn't plan to do this today," he said. "But I've known for weeks. I want you in every part of my life. Not as a guest. Not as a visitor. As my partner." Lauren stared down at the ring, then up at him. "You're serious?" "I've never been more." She closed the box softly, then stood. "I don't care about the ring. I know. But I care about you." He took her hands in his. "Then say yes." She didn't hesitate. "Yes." They didn't make a big announcement. No press release. No social media post. Just a quiet dinner with people who mattered miles. Her neighbor. The couple she always helped at the front desk. And then a private ceremony on the hotel rooftop with string lights overhead and the ocean in the distance. Lauren wore a dress she found at a vintage boutique. Xavier wore a suit he didn't overthink. They danced barefoot, ate cake with their hands, laughed until the moon came up. Afterward, they returned to the penthouse where the only thing waiting was each other. As the months passed, they built a life that didn't look like anyone else's. Xavier traveled less but worked smarter. Lauren eventually moved into the suite full-time, then helped design a community outreach program through Orton Holdings that trained and hired local hospitality workers. She didn't want a title. She wanted impact. And Xavier let her lead. They still made space for quiet nights on the balcony, tea and blankets, and music floating through the open doors. They argued sometimes. Stubborn hearts always did. But they never walked away. They chose each other. Again and again. Years later, as Lauren stood in the same hotel lobby where they first met, holding a clipboard and directing vendors for a charity gala, she caught sight of Xavier across the room. He was older. A little grayer. still devastating in a navy suit. He saw her and smiled, the kind of smile that only she got. The one that said, no matter how many hotels he built, she was still the best thing he'd ever stumbled into. She walked toward him, heels clicking over marble, and when she reached him, he didn't say anything. He just took her hand. And she held on. Always.